I'd like to call the December 13th, 2012 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council to order. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton?
Here.
Mr. Ponce?
Here.
Mayor Holman?
Here.
Vice Mayor Friday?
Here.
Mr. Foster?
Here. Our first order of business today is council minutes for the meeting of November 5th and November 8th, 2012, and the joint City Council Planning Commission meeting of November 9th, 2012. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the approval of the minutes of November 5th, November 8th, and the joint meeting of November 9th.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Newton?
Aye.
Mr. Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Friday?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye. We have no matters of special privilege today. So our next agenda item is background presentations, and this is a presentation regarding the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending June 30, 2012. The city's Finance and Audit Committee meets annually to discuss the audit report. The committee consists of myself as chair, Gwen Williams, and Bob Taylor. The committee met this year on December 5th. The Finance and Audit Committee meets with auditors and staff to discuss the audit engagement, internal controls, and for a briefing on the financial report and result of operations for the year. Also, an important part of the meeting is to discuss concerns that the independent auditor may have regarding internal controls, staff training, or anything they feel needs to be discussed based on their review of the financial systems and procedures in place during the year. The committee heard a presentation from Ann Wall, manager with Robinson, Farmer, and Cox Associates, centered on the audit engagement, internal controls, and accounting standards. Finance Director Phil Serra gave a presentation on the operating results and financial position at the end of the year. A motion was made, seconded, and unanimously passed to recommend acceptance of the auditor's report as presented and to forward it to City Council for today's meeting. The minutes of that Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be distributed next week. Today we're going to hear presentations first from Ann Wall, then from Phil Serra, and then we'll come back to Council for any questions they might have. So, Ann, welcome, and good to see you again.
You too. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here to talk to you a little bit about the city's comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2012, and just to talk about the audit and the process. This year's CAFR is 102 pages, and that's not including the 11-page introductory section. So it's quite a comprehensive document. The city is required to have an annual audit conducted each year. Code of Virginia requires it, among other things. Your audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and generally accepted auditing standards. Your report is also required to be submitted to the Auditor of Public Accounts by the November 30th deadline, and along with comparative cost report forms. So we did that as part of the engagement as well. As part of the audit engagement, really the only part of this bound-up document that is from your auditors are the 3 opinions that we issue, and they really kind of correlate to the 3 facets of the audit. We issue an opinion on the financial statement presentation, which that's on page 1 of the audit report, and that's where we do substantive work and examine supporting documentation that relates to the financial statement presentation and the footnotes. And the city received a clean or unqualified opinion. The other 2 parts of the other 2 opinions that we issue are related to our review of your internal controls and our review of the federal program dollars that you receive. If you expend over $500,000 in federal program dollars in a year, you're required to have something called a single audit, which the city does. Those 2 opinions are at the back of the audit in the compliance section of the report, but those were also clean opinions as well. In terms of the federal program dollars, each year we look at different federal programs as major. There's a risk-based approach. Just because of the way the city is structured, generally the social services programs are the ones that get the most attention. And last year we did look at, this year that we just completed, the 2 programs that we audited were in the social services area. But based on our work, we concluded that the compliance requirements associated with those programs were followed. The city also submits its report to the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, for the Financial Achievement of Excellence in Financial Reporting Certificate. And I believe that was submitted online this week. The city has received this award for the last 25 years. In order to qualify for the certificate, a government must publish an easily readable and efficiently organized comprehensive annual financial report. We believe that this report meets the certificate program's requirements. The layout and the presentation of the report are, there haven't been any changes or required changes to the report in terms of the presentation. The way it's laid out, actually the first two exhibits in the financial report, they're on something called the government-wide basis of accounting, and they include all the city's long-term assets and long-term liabilities. Then the exhibits after 1 and 2 are on the modified accrual basis, which is what you generally do your financial reporting on. And that's what the city's books are maintained on. The city personnel assisted greatly in the preparation of this document. There's something called a management's discussion and analysis, which is at the front of the document, which is a very extensive, detailed analysis of really kind of comparing where you are this year to where you are last year. And there's also a transmittal letter that is in the front of the document as well that was written by the Finance Department. And there's statistical tables in the back that were also drafted internally. I would just want you to know that we received excellent cooperation from city staff during the course of our audit. You know, we work a lot with the Finance Department, but we also work with other departments as well, and our relationship with them is very professional, and we appreciated everyone, you know, giving us their time so that we could be efficient and effective when we were here. At the conclusion of our audit, we did propose just a handful of adjusting entries, and they've been posted to the city's accounting system. They have something called Period 13, where they post the year-end adjustments, and so the city's financial statements do mirror the audit report. We did not issue a management letter related to any internal control matters, but that doesn't mean that we didn't discuss internal control matters. That's a big part of the audit, and we do a lot of that work when we come and do preliminary work. And this year, like other years, sometimes we make suggestions when we're here in preliminary, and then we come back in the fall, and the suggestions have been, corrective actions already been put into play. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management regarding any disagreements over financial matters or anything of that nature. For once, there was actually no new pronouncements that were effective for this year's audit. So on the horizon, there's actually one new pronouncement, GASB number 68, Accounting and Financial Reporting for Pensions, which establishes new financial reporting requirements for most governments that have a pension benefit, that offer pension benefits for employees. Most local governments do that through the Virginia retirement system. And this standard requires that the net pension liability be reported as a long-term liability for the first time on the government-wide statements that I was talking about, beginning in FY15. So currently, those unfunded pension liabilities are just really reported in there's a schedule in the audit report, but they're not incorporated into the financial statements. The fiscal impact of that will be known at a future date, and we have a couple of years to deal with that. That really concludes my comments. I believe the audit report has been posted to the city's website in its entirety.
Great.
So, thank you.
And thank you very much. Phil, would you like to do your, and then we can come back if there are questions for either one of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hallman and members of the council. I'm going to go over some brief slides that were presented to the Finance and Audit Committee last Wednesday. I hope I'm not going to get into a whole lot of great detail, because that's what the MD&A, the Management's Discussion and Analysis that Ann referred to, is all about. It's essentially the cliff notes of the audit report, so that's where all the detail is. But I do want to go over these slides. We're going to talk about the results of operations for the general and utility funds, talk about the financial position, and that concerns the fund balance in the general fund, the reserve policy, and then the working capital for the utility fund. And then we'll show you some continuing graphs and tables that we keep regarding multi-year trends, and then the VRS pension plan funding. Looking at the general fund revenues for the year, and this includes the sales tax, the capital spending. Total revenues for the year were $36.9 million, and that was level with last year's revenue receipts. pretty much the same makeup dollar-wise in all of the categories, so no surprises there. On the expenditure side, a total of $35.5 million was spent, including capital projects for the year, compared to $35.9 million last year, a reduction of 1.1%, and a lot of that has to do with the reduction in capital spending for the year. And then looking at just the operating revenues compared to budget, the total operating revenues over budget for the year were $258,000, and a lot of that's in the other local taxes with tourism taxes. And then on the expenditure side, total expenditures were under budget by $1,018,000 for the year. And as you can see, the majority of it is in the city departments. We'll break that down, give you an idea. The operations side, $334,000, and the operations side was under budget. That relates to the transfer to the Public Assistance Fund being under budget. And then various operational savings in the fire, planning, courthouse, city council, and a few of the public works departments. And then there was a few maintenance lines throughout the report that were under budget. Personnel costs, about $386,000 in total, dealing with salary savings and related benefit savings. Some of that was in the fire, police, codes compliance. There were various healthcare and dental lines in savings throughout the operating budget, as well as a few part-time line items. And then a little bit of savings, $90,000 savings in capital outlay and various machinery and equipment accounts in the operating departments. Looking at revenues over budget of $258,000 for the year, and then expenditures under budget by a little over $1 million. We ended up the year with an operating surplus of $1.277 million, so just under $1.3 million for the year. And graphically, this is how that's displayed. This is the number right there. The gap there is the surplus for the year. Red being expenditures, green being revenues. So you can see the trend since 2001. The dashed line, obviously, is the budget. So especially right through here, you can see this. Most of this surplus has been associated with savings on the expenditure side. Looking at the dollar-wise, you can see the big changes that happened over the last 6 years anyway. You can see right here, real estate assessments continue to rise as well as expenses, but everything started to come to fruition here with the recession. We ended up with about a $250,000 surplus in FY09. We regrouped on the expenditure side, and we've had surpluses fairly steady level of receipts on the revenue side, but most of the surpluses are associated with expenditure savings down here. And then this is just the graph going back to 1983. This is the governmental funds, which includes the general fund, sales tax fund, and the public assistance fund, just showing the trend with expenditures and revenues throughout the years, with periods of savings, periods of spending. You can see these are the periods where we actually had big capital projects, so we had higher spending than the receipts taken in for the years. And we ended up this year with one of those years where we had spending lower than revenues. And then fund balance. We began the year with a fund balance of $26.9 million. We added in revenues, accounted for some changes with bond premiums on the bond issue we did last summer, and taking away expenditures and the transfer to the Public Assistance Fund. Ended up the year with $27.9 million in fund balance. And then the components of that, there are 3 categories. This is a new GASB designation here that we implemented last year, I believe. Non-spendable was $1.2 million. This relates to the 2 properties the city is holding for resale, so we can't spend that money. And then the assigned, that's capital projects, that's a carryover, $1.375 million that we're carrying over in the capital projects plan. And then the residual is called unassigned, and it's $25.3 million at year end. And how that relates to fund balance policy, the policy since I believe it's 2003, 35% of operating revenues needs to be maintained as surplus. That would put it at a necessary amount of $11.4 million. Actually, at $25.3 million, we were almost 78% of operating revenues for the FY12 revenues that were received. So we're still in compliance with the reserve policy. cash and investments at year end, and most of the money was in an FDIC insured account, as you know from your financial report you get every month. So $24.1 million was in checking account CDs and that FDIC insured account. And then about $1.7 million is still in the local government investment pools. We had almost $26 million at year end. Earning very low rates, we made about $125,000 in interest this year. I look back at FY07, the city made $1.6 million. So rates continue to be very, very low, and our cash reserves are about the same as they were back then. So that's a big impact on the operations when you don't make that kind of money in interest. The utility fund, total revenues were just under $6 million for the year, and expenses were about $240,000 lower than that. So we did have an operating income, but then adding in the non-operating items, adding in interest income and connection fees, and taking away the debt service interest, ended up the year with an increase in net assets about $40,000, $38,000 to be exact. And then working capital, simply the difference between current assets and liabilities. Working capital remained at $3.9 million at the end of the year. And here's the schedule that Ann mentioned that's required to be in the audit report. The big difference this year is the addition of the FY 2000, or the June 30th, 2011 actuarial valuation. The value of the assets increased from $42.6 million to $43.1, but there was a larger increase in the actuarial accrued liability. It went up to $57.9. So the gap, the difference went from $13 million to almost $15 million. So as a ratio of the assets over the liabilities, it went down to 74.5%. So there's a lot of reasons for this, and the biggest reason, obviously, is the continuing low performance in the stock market that the assets are based on, and then the actual value of the liabilities continue to increase. So, and we're going to be getting into a lot of things with this new GASB standard, the GASB 68 that Ann mentioned. That's going to be required in 2 more years. So we're going to be giving a lot more information about pensions and what we're doing with that as the VRS continues with this problem. And this is what the gap looks like graphically. You can see right here. It continues to widen as we move on. Back in 2000 and 2002, we were fully funded, and then it was just more of the same. The value of the assets does not keep pace with the liability. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you.
Thank you, Phil. Let me come back to council for any questions, comments.
Sure. Mr. Sarah, first of all, thanks so much for adding that third line on the revenue versus expenditures chart. I think it's really helpful to see how the differences track with what was actually budgeted, because otherwise there's no context between the two. On the assigned capital projects in the fund balance, are those items in CIP that we intend to do but we haven't gotten around to paying for yet, or can you explain where that is and what those items specifically are at this point?
Those were budgeted amounts from last year that were unfinished at June 30th. We just moved that money into FY13. If you look on your monthly financial report, you'll see a column there that adds to that it's $1.375 million. That's exactly what they are. And you can see the specific accounts that it's for on the monthly report.
And on the utility fund interest costs?
Debt service.
Debt service on the bond for the Newport News Waterworks funding? So what that, correct me if I'm wrong, what that looks like then is that what we've been doing with the incremental increase in the water rate over time is accomplishing what it was set out to do in covering that increased expense that we knew was coming down the road. Is that fair?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And on the increase in actuarial accrued liability, are there any, I can appreciate why the assets aren't keeping up when the investment performance isn't keeping up with the expectations set up when the actuarial calculations are made, but why such a significant increase in the liability? What's changing there?
It deals with all of the tools that the actuaries use to calculate that liability, and I believe they know what that liability is. It's just that our assets aren't keeping up with them. So there's a lot of reasons. There's salary increases that are actually projected. They may or may not pan out, but when they put the liability on it, it's in there. So,
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it just strikes me in a time period when there have been no salary increases for the past 3 or 4 years, unless there's a change in the retention of employees who are expected to leave over a period of time, or people are living longer. I'm not an actuarial.
I think it's probably a combination of those things, because, we've actually not had many raises, and we've actually reduced the size of the workforce, and yet that still goes up.
And they went up 10% between 09 and 10, and that's huge.
To answer the question, we would need to get the statement and see exactly what the projections are. And for instance, one of them, there's an assumption of salary increases, even if we haven't done them in the past few years. And but we'd have to look at mortality tables. And there is one benefit increase, however, that is in there. What, about 3-4 years ago, we increased the benefit for police and fire for the multiple for years of service. So once that was done, that adds additional long-term costs. But it's those combination of factors. And to answer it precisely, we'd have to get a copy of the study and see what those assumptions are.
Whatever those factors are, they may or may not be unique to the city, or, they could be equally accruing over the entire Commonwealth, or there could be some specific things about Williamsburg.
With the exception of that one benefit change, you would expect the tables to be the same with regard to assumptions on pay increases. I think they adopt the same thing across the board for localities, and certainly the mortality tables are going to be the same.
And you may not know the answer to this, but it would be interesting to know at some point, who audits what the actuaries do?
I don't know.
Because it strikes me as if I would like to think that all of their assumptions are valid and based in some reasonable set of facts.
Well, they work for the Virginia Retirement System,
right.
So ultimately the answer to your question is the VRS board, who hires the actuaries and approves their assumptions and their approach to their study.
And I think as we move toward 2015, where that comes on our books in a way, it's going to be incumbent upon us to have discussions with VRS about these very types of questions, because in essence, the assumptions they've been making over the past are influencing in 2015 our financial position in a way that we have no control over. And so I think the next 2 years, as I think Ann and Phil have suggested, are going to be very interesting years as we try to resolve that.
And I recognize we're all in this together, but at some point, I can't help but wonder if it wouldn't be useful for Virginia Municipal League to look at this, and with whatever resources they have, and maybe be helpful in coordinating dialogue there, because you'd hate for it to disproportionately impact the overall financial statements in a way that's just not appropriate.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to be underfunded. I appreciate that too. So, Phil, thanks to you and your team and everybody in the city. I mean, we say this every year. It's the finance people that report on the great work that every department and every employee of the city does to keep these expenses low, and even in these difficult times, maintain those operating surpluses that allow us to do some of the additional capital work that's so necessary. And to have such a stellar track record, does it put any pressure on you to make sure you don't lose that certificate of excellence each year?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. That's all.
Scott?
Clyde, Paul, and Jack kind of take the bull by the horns on this, but I was going to say, given that growing divide and, pointing to the market reality, in the next 2 years, as you say, what are we doing to affect that situation besides kind of hope that the market comes back? So I'll be interested in more of that discussion.
We will have them, I think.
And I think all of our eyes really focused on the pension funding and that growing gap, and so I think we've covered that pretty well. So I don't have any questions, but thank you for all your hard work. Thanks.
I've changed the subject just a little, and I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but the city has recently changed its relationship with the Housing Authority. And the Housing Authority always had a separate audit, of course, and a lot of federal money, of course. So is that next year going to be part of our audit, or is it going to stay separate? Do you have it? Or have we not decided that yet?
I can give you a couple of just basic things that I know at this point. The Housing Authority, we believe, will be a component unit of the city, so they'll be a part of our audit, meaning their numbers will show up in our tables.
Right.
They'll also be required to have a separate audit, I believe. Anna's going to do the audit for next year, for the year that just ended, this year. So what we'll do, we'll take the results of the audit when she's done with that. That'll show up in our audit report next year as a component unit. Since there's an overlap in the funding years, our year ends June 30th.
Right.
Housing Authority's plan ends September 30th.
Yes.
So yes, there will be a lot of interchange with the numbers in our document, but they will have separate audit.
This is another one of those unintended consequences.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's a very type of question we're going to have to deal with as we move forward in
Right.
figuring out exactly sort of how this is going to work most efficiently and effectively, efficiently from the city's standpoint and effectively from the standpoint of providing the services to the residents.
Right, exactly.
So,
Yeah. Thank you.
Phil, Ann, thank you very much. So again, I think this is, we really do appreciate your work. We appreciate Phil's sharp pencil, and we appreciate all the department heads who help you with your sharp pencil. But Ann, thank you again for the audit, and it's always good to have a clean audit report. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity to
Okay.
serve as your auditor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our next order of business are public hearings, and we have 3 today. The first is PCR 12-21, a request of Parkway Partners, LLC, to amend the zoning proffers for 222 Parkway Drive to allow a 30-lot townhouse subdivision. This is proposed ordinance 12-30. Read.
This case that you see outlined in red showing the parcel fronting on Parkway Drive was rezoned to RM2 high-density multifamily residential conditional in August of 2003. This was for a 46-unit condominium building with underground parking, a rather massive building, as you can see from this drawing. The new proposal is for a townhouse subdivision of 30 townhouse lots, which results about 9 units per net acre. Since this proposal is not consistent with the existing proffers, even though it's consistent with the RM2 zoning, the proffers need to be amended. For this development, the houses are proposed to be priced in the low 200s up to, I believe, a maximum of around 250. They'll be mostly 3-bedroom units and in the 18 to 2,200 square foot floor area size. And this is a 3-story townhouses, single-car garages, and that's the elevation. This is designated in our comprehensive plan, both the existing one and the proposed plan, as high-density multifamily residential land use. As you can see from the site plan, this breaks up the massing of the project a lot more than that single condominium building. This will have a 93 to 113 foot building setback from Pinecrest, which is over here, with a 70-foot buffer area with supplemental plantings along the inner edge. There'll be a small guest parking area, 2 recreation areas, and an underground stormwater storage area between the end townhouses and the buffer area. In this area, there'll be a 65-foot setback from either side of the property with 30-foot rear yards plus a 35-foot buffer. There'll be a 38.5-foot building setback along the front of the site, And supplemental plantings, like I mentioned, are proposed along the edge of this buffer and along the edges where the stormwater management features will have to pierce the buffer along Parkway Drive. There'll be sidewalk along the frontage of the property and along both sides of the private drive. In addition, the developer has proffered to extend the sidewalk down this way, which will tie into the existing sidewalk just past the Econo Lodge, so there'll be a complete sidewalk connection to 2nd Street. The proffers that have been offered with this case are what follows. No more than 30 townhouse lots developed generally in accordance with this conceptual plan with the minimum buffers as shown. A covenant providing that no more than 10 townhouses may be rented at any one time. This will be enforced by the Board of Directors of the Homeowners Association, not by the city. This will be 33% of the townhouses. It's proffered that the sidewalk extended south to connect by the Econo Lodge, as I just mentioned. The owner will dedicate a strip of right-of-way along the front of the property so that the entire sidewalk is located within the public right-of-way. And finally, it's proffered to plant supplemental understory landscaping as shown on this conceptual plan and subject to Planning Commission approval in the site plan review process. Staff recommended approval. Planning Commission held a public hearing last month, and they recommended approval by a vote of 5-0, and City Council action that is needed if Council desires to follow the Commission's recommendation is to approve proposed ordinance 12-30, which also approves the proposed proffers.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll come back to Council for any questions before opening the hearing.
2 questions. Mr. Nestor, can you address the parking on the site? That there's off-street parking associated with each unit in the form of a driveway and a garage.
Correct.
There's the guest parking, what looks to be about 8 spaces.
Correct. At
the end of the private drive. It doesn't appear that there's room for any on-street parking on the private drive?
Correct. Each unit will have, as required by our ordinance, 2 parking spaces. There will be one inside the garage and one in front of the garage. And the 8 parking spaces in the back fulfill the visitor parking requirement. There will be no parking allowed along this driveway. That's a combination of the width of the driveway and the fact that with all the individual driveways, even if the road was wide enough, there wouldn't be places to park along the roadway. There is on-street parking on Parkway Drive.
And enforcement of parking issues there is up to the residents?
Well, it's up to the residents, and that is needed for fire department access to the site.
Right. That was the next question, and I know other people look at this. I assume the chiefs have looked at this, but it just strikes me, especially if the guest parking area is occupied, the ability to maneuver equipment in there looks extremely limited. But I'm sure they've weighed in on that, so that's all.
Scott?
Reed, can you give us a little bit better, clear definition of what a supplemental planting is? I'm kind of imagining like a transition type shrub.
It could be something along the lines of bayberry or holly bushes or something like that.
And that transitions into larger existing trees in the buffer.
Right. And the intent of this, and this was a concern of Planning Commission Site Plan Review Committee, was to have a more visually solid buffer by putting some evergreen shrubbery in the bottom to fill in the gaps between the trees.
Gotcha. That's all I have.
Okay. No questions? Judy?
Reed, I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals when that first proposal came along, and the Park Service weighed in very heavily. They were very upset about the idea that that building was going to loom over the parkway. Have we heard from the Park Service?
We have not heard from the Park Service.
Okay, so they're no longer worried about that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would think if anything, they might think this was an improvement.
No, I'm sure it's an improvement. I don't know if it's enough. It must be enough of an improvement for the Park Service.
Any further questions before I open the public hearing? Thank you, Reed. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak to the matter, please come forward. Vernon, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, I'm Vernon Getty. It's my pleasure to be here representing the applicant. Also here is Bunny Spencer with Parkway Partners and representatives of AES Consulting Engineers. We obviously agree with Reed and the Planning Commission and think this is a good project and a good location. And with the proffers Reed described, you'll be a good neighbor and good for the city. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions you have of us, and we respectfully ask you to approve the project.
Okay. Thank you, Vernon.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Anyone else wish to speak to this? If not, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
May I ask Mr. Nestor one more question?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess it's moving north. Would that be extending down Parkway Drive towards the Parkway along the front of the property? The sidewalk will, as designed here, will go to the end of the property line?
Correct.
Is there, I don't recall that there's any sidewalk connectivity beyond that across the bridge over the park?
There is not. When the Northeast Triangle Focus Group looked at this area, what was decided right now on the opposite side of the street, there's sidewalk from 2nd Street up to the Wyndham East driveway entrance. The focus group recommended, it's been incorporated in the comprehensive plan, to, at some point in the future, reconstruct Parkway Drive between the Wyndham East entrance and Capitol Landing Road. There is room to put curb and gutter and bike lanes and a sidewalk on one side. The idea was the sidewalk on the Wyndham East side, so there would be a continuous sidewalk connection all the way between 2nd Street and Capitol Landing Road, and then this sidewalk would end, as shown here. It would not be extended across the park.
Sure. And I think that's important because, not that extending that sidewalk is at all the responsibility of the developer of this project, but as we put more residents on that Parkway Drive corridor, there's going to be more of an interest in moving up Parkway Drive up to Capitol Landing Road. And as it stands right now, pedestrian access is, you can do it, but it's not the best situation, particularly the way the shoulder slopes off on either side. So I think in the long term, I think that's a welcome addition. So thank you. That was my only question.
Any other questions? Any discussion?
Yeah, you talked about the proffer of extending the sidewalk towards 2nd Street, which will obviously have an effect on the neighboring Econo Lodge. I was hoping to hear that there was some assurances that whatever disturbance would be, mediated, whatever happens to the existing shrubs along in front of the Econo Lodge, that all that landscaping would be put back. I didn't hear anything about what assurances that property owner may have.
The developer has talked to the property owner, the Econo Lodge. I have talked to the property owner. Of course, there is planning in the city's existing right-of-way, which is where the sidewalk will be going. So some of the existing plantings will have to be removed, and most of the existing landscaped area in front of the Econo Lodge will be replaced by the sidewalk. All of those details will be worked out in the site plan review process, and I guess our hope would be, as we work those out, that the developer will continue to work with the property owner, as the planning department will, to see if we can resolve any issues that develop.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I'd just like to add a comment to that. That Econo Lodge is a terrific example of what can be done to beautify a very small space with attractive landscaping. And while we want the sidewalk connectivity, I take Mr. Bond's point about we also like to maintain the visual aesthetic that has been put in place by an obviously careful and thoughtful property owner, which we'd like to encourage more of throughout the city. So I appreciate the fact that both are going to work together on that. I'll just add that I think this is, in many ways, an improvement over what was previously approved, and something that we should support. It provides housing in a level that we know, well, we don't know, but I would believe it would be successful in the current marketplace. And I just appreciate the property owners going to this extent to think it through.
Yeah, I will add an agreement to that, and I think it mirrors some developments that have been quite successful in the city, and I think it opens up some real opportunities. So, any further discussion, comments? I'll take.
Mr. Mayor, I move approve PCR 12-021, request of Parkway Partners LLC to amend the zoning proffers for 222 Parkway Drive to allow 30-lot townhome subdivision. Proposed ordinance number 12-30.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for being here today. And thank you for a terrific plan. Our next public hearing concerns 4 zoning ordinance provisions that are, and revisions that are mandated by the Code of Virginia. Chris, should I turn this over to you?
Yes, I'm going to handle these.
Okay.
These are required changes to the city code based on changes to the state code. The first is there is now a requirement in the state code that prohibits localities from imposing a total ban on departures and landings of non-commercial, privately owned helicopters for personal use. The localities can require a special exception, a special use permit, or a conditional use permit if someone wants to land and take off from the same parcel repeatedly. Currently, the city zoning ordinance only provides one zoning district where medical transport helicopters are allowed to land and take off, so we need to update the city code in order to provide for some landings and takeoffs of helicopters as a result of this change to the code. What staff is proposing is that a single helicopter landing or departure may occur in the B2 Corridor Commercial District, the ED and ED2 Economic Development Districts, and the Museum Support District. Staff is also proposing that repeated landings and departures could occur in all zoning districts, but only with a special use permit. And the thought behind that is there are so few places in the city where someone could safely land a helicopter and take off that council and planning commission could deal with those on a case-by-case basis. In all instances, the operator of the helicopter would have to apply all FAA regulations and safety requirements. And so that's the proposed ordinance 1231. The second matter is demolition of buildings in architectural preservation districts. There is now an exception in the state code that provides that the building inspector, in the event that he finds that a building that would require the locality to approve demolition may still require that a hazardous structure be raised even without that locality's approval, in the event that the building is so hazardous that tearing the building down is the only option. So that's an exception that's now required. Several years ago, the General Assembly extended the sunset provision dates for land use approvals to July 1st of 2014. That date has now been extended to July 1st of 2017. So if in July of 2011 you had land use approval for a project that you haven't started or completed, now you have until July 1st of 2017 to complete that. And also the requirement that the city accept the payment of proffers for residential developments on a per-unit basis when those units are completed has also been extended to 2017. And so proposed ordinance 12-33 provides for those changes. And finally, there's a procedural change to the Board of Zoning Appeals requirements that in when an applicant has appealed a decision of the zoning administrator and the results in the BZA after the public hearing and after the hearing for the applicant results in a tie vote, the applicant can request that the Board of Zoning Appeals consider the matter at its next regular meeting, and so the ordinance has been amended to adopt that change as well. And so staff's recommendation is that council approve proposed ordinance 12-31 through 12-34.
Thank you very much. Any questions for
I
the
do.
city attorney? Yeah.
I think I have a question. We have to make all of these changes. There's no choice here. But I do have a question about the helicopter landing and takeoff issue. Part of this is because I don't know what guidelines or regulations the FAA follows or imposes upon any applicant in this sort of situation. But do we have any idea what sort of time frame is involved?
Time frame.
Well, I mean, for someone who wants to land a helicopter and take off in the city, if it's a one-time basis, they have to go to the FAA and get approval first, and then they have to come and get a special use permit?
No, I'm not sure. They would need a special use permit to repeatedly land and take off. So in those specific zoning districts, I don't think they would have to go get approval from the FAA. I think there are certain guidelines that the FAA would require in terms of location and space and how much clearance they have around them. I have to admit I'm not conversant in FAA regulations, but if it is required, then they would be required to do it under our zoning ordinance. If they wanted to take off more than once on the same parcel, then they would have to come and get a special use permit, and that would, of course, be applicable to all zoning districts and not simply those four.
And more than once in a year?
There is no time frame specified, so it could be a substantial period of time.
Okay. And I guess one of the things that, I don't know how we influence this, but one of the things that concerns me is I would think you'd want the helicopter taking the path that has, or any airborne vehicle, whatever we want to call them, fixed wing or otherwise, taking the path over the least densely occupied area, and at the same time, I certainly wouldn't want them flying in over the historic area every time they wanted to come in. So does the FAA look at the cultural resources of the area too?
I can't answer that, and I'm not sure this really affects flight path either. I do know that historically there have been some landings when there have been VIPs on the golf course at Connie Williamsburg, so I think that's more the situation that you would run into where it's a one-time event where special circumstances influenced it. If that became something that a property owner wanted to do on a semi-routine basis, they would need to come and get a special use permit from council.
That's all.
Any further questions? Can we do one hearing for all four
Yes.
things? Okay. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak to any of these four issues, please come forward. Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for any further questions, discussions, and action.
Will we vote separately?
Do we need to vote separately, or can we do one action that does all four?
Procedurally, I don't think it matters. It might be less confusing to do one per motion and vote.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and move that we approve proposed ordinance 12-31.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Everybody can do one, so.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of proposed ordinance 12-32.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, I'll recommend that we approve proposed ordinance number 12-33.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the approval of proposed ordinance 12-34.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
And Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Chris, for your work on this. This is things we have to do. Our final public hearing today is on PCR 12-26, expansion of the Midtown Parking District, proposed ordinance 12-35. Reed?
As you recall, the Midtown Parking District was created in June of 2012 as part of a package of zoning changes made in the Arts District area, and this was as a result of a letter written to Planning Commission by the EDAs as we were looking at ways to improve development opportunities in that area. When it was created, the point was raised that in future it could be expanded to serve the entire Midtown planning area as we move forward with our comprehensive plan implementation. As you recall, this allows great flexibility for existing buildings because we have a basic one parking space per 400 square foot parking requirement for all buildings, so uses can be freely interchanged between existing buildings without providing additional parking. It also allows the prime determinant of business uses to be market demand rather than the off-street parking requirements, and it reduces a parking requirement for new buildings, allowing further flexibility. Since the existing district was enacted, the wine and design business was established. That would not have been allowed without the change we made. Also, Extraordinary Cupcakes now has a little patio area and seating out front. That would not have been allowed. So we've removed some obstacles to things that make sense. As part of the discussion at our community forum on September 5th, it was requested that the district be expanded as shown in the red area to include the rest of the B3 district, which is part of the Midtown planning area. Specifically, Steve Monday, the owner of Creative Cuisine, which is located right here on Garrison Avenue, said he was looking to host catered events at his business for up to 50 people, which he could do if the Midtown Parking District was in effect. The draft of our Commercial and Economic Development chapter in the new comprehensive plan supports this request, and it states that the Midtown Parking District should be extended as shown in this area. Staff recommended this extension. Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 14th and recommended approval by a 5-0 vote. And to implement the Commission's recommendation, City Council would need to approve proposed ordinance 21-35.
Thank you, Reed. Are there any questions for Reed before I open the public hearing?
No, sir.
If not, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak to this matter may do so. Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for further question, discussion, and action.
I'll make a comment. The number of parking spaces based upon solely on square footage has a purpose to ensure that adequate parking is available on site in a commercial location so that the parking doesn't either infringe upon other commercial ventures in the area, or maybe more importantly on be residential, any associated surrounding residential area. But I think we'll find, and we've seen that most business interests have their own better gauge of how much parking they need than what we might put in as a number connected solely to square footage. And an example, Yankee Candle, when they put the building in, they wanted more parking than the city required because they felt that they would have the customer support that would warrant that. If you look at the Williamsburg Shopping Center piece as it stands right there, they may be glad to have every parking space. But if you drive around or through that property on any given day, which from the street looks like a wide swath of asphalt, it's generally less than half occupied. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the success of any one particular business in there. It's because there's more parking than is really necessary. And when you think about the environmental impact of that, the aesthetic impact of that, and what it means to the potential development of property from a profitability standpoint, when a certain footprint of the property has to be devoted to a non-revenue producing function, it seems to be an unnecessary inhibitor. And another terrific example that Mr. Nestor cited is the restraint that was placed on Extraordinary Cupcakes. They just wanted the opportunity for people to sit down for a few minutes and enjoy a cupcake. Maybe they sit there for a half hour. I don't think they're sitting there for 4 hours. But the parking requirement that would have been necessary for that to happen would have prevented that aspect of a business that is exactly the type of thing we want in this district, because it creates a sense of vitality and a sense of dynamic community and a sense of people being outdoors and not just moving directly from inside a building and into a car and on the street. There's a sense of place when people are out on the streets and walking around. And this type of flexibility, in my opinion, goes a long way to help promote that, and I believe it's something that we should support.
The thing that Paul touched on that I'll emphasize is business isn't going to invest in a place that has inadequate parking because it's not in their business interest. So as close as we can get to freeing businesses up to make that determination on their own, I think is smart, and especially given the businesses Reed cited as examples. So.
And I think, some people may look at this and say, well, there's ample parking, there's probably not, parking is not an inhibitor to somebody wanting to open a business in that shopping center. But I think to the point of the flexibility, as new businesses may come in, maybe need smaller spaces, to take that requirement, kind of out of the equation for them, helps open the door. And I think what we're saying to anybody who's not a business in the city, what we're saying is we're open for business. Here's an opportunity. We're taking the impediment away, and we're trying to be a little more creative about it. So it's a good idea.
I agree. I think some of the rules in the past have been way too rigid, and I'm glad to see we're getting beyond that.
And I think that this is an area where I think there's terrific potential going into the future. And again, as you all have suggested, this really does create opportunities as we look to the future here. So, thanks. Any further discussion?
I'd be happy to move that we approve proposed ordinance 12-35.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Thank you all, and thank you, staff, for all of this. We'll move to our next agenda item, which is reports. The first are monthly financial statements. Jack, anything in particular to?
Yes, I'd point out, if you look on your revenue page, the first sheet, we appear to be running over $300,000 ahead of where we were last year, but part of that is this one-time sale and receipt on the fire truck. Part of that is FEMA reimbursement. The bottom line is we're just about level where we were five months into the fiscal year this year as last year. But I'd also note back on page 5 that we now have for sales tax revenue the September results in, and showing a 23% increase over September a year ago for this September. A lot of good reasons why that happened. I'd like to think part of that is Arts Month and all of those activities. And it's also reflected in the room tax numbers for September. That was up 8% over that month in the prior year, and the highest September we've had in a long time in terms of room tax. Meals tax also looked good that month. So that's on the positive side. Overall, we're up for the year on sales tax 5%. So there's some positive indicators out there, along with the ones that seem to be steady state.
Any further questions?
I'd just like to add something to that. Last September, we were up over the September prior as well.
That's correct.
And at the time, we also wanted to say we'd like to think this is connected to the success of Arts Month, and that was in spite of what was absolutely dreadful weather on just about every weekend in the month of September, and it was kicked off with a less than welcome hurricane that But nevertheless, we were up in calendar year 11 over 10. So to see it increase again in 12 is a good sign. I'm sure the weather played a part in that because it was a little bit better. And I'd like to think Arts Month, the continued improvement there, the promotion of it, the expansion of it is having an impact.
I think there are some interesting things in the works for next year as well. So, any further questions on what about monthly operating reports?
Nothing in particular to point out.
Any questions for city manager reports are next? We have three. The first is the economic development plan adoption.
Economic Development Director Michelle DeWitt will give this report.
I see Michelle. I see the chair of the EDA, Bonnie Mason, is here as well. So thank you both.
We thank him for being here. Mayor and members of council, today you're talking about the economic development plan. So I wanted to give a history of how we got here and some highlights of the plan. And then the EDA and staff recommend approval, formal adoption today by City Council. So our current economic development plan was adopted in 2006. So that was used as the baseline to move forward with this plan. So almost a year ago, in January 2011, the EDA had a call for public input into the economic development plan, received that input. Then they worked in subcommittees on different areas of focus within those comments, and came up with a plan that they approved in September of this year. So I had the wrong year. I'm sorry. We started in January 2012. I forget what year we're in. I apologize for that. So it's been almost a year of work, or 9 months of work, and the EDA adopted it in September. And to go over some of the highlights, the 5 overarching economic development objectives remain the same as in 2006. And those are that we'll work with our existing businesses to help them prosper and grow. We'll encourage new businesses to locate in the city that complement what's here already and also diversify the economy. We'll continue to have infrastructure of a high quality that matches the sense of place here in Williamsburg. Fourthly, we'll promote a positive business environment, and Councilman Pons just mentioned an example of that in your last ordinance you just approved. And fifthly, we know that our counties are growing, and we are no longer the only employment, retail, dining location in the historic triangle, but we want to make sure we remain one of the specialty locations for employment, retail, and dining, and hospitality. So those are the 5 overarching objectives. And then the EDA dove down into 5 strategic areas they want to concentrate on in the next few years. 3 of them are geographic areas, and the other 2 are economic development concepts. Also, this occurred jointly with the comprehensive plan work, which was really exciting. The EDA attended some of the Planning Commission's work sessions, had input in that and discussion, and it's really nice to see these 2 plans coming together and matching in a lot of areas. So the 3 geographic areas that the EDA points out that we should be looking for opportunities for redevelopment and transition in those areas are Midtown, the downtown, and the Northeast Triangle. And then the 2 broader areas to focus on is economic diversification and also our tourism products, so what the tourists experience once they arrive here in Williamsburg. So since the EDA's adoption in September, we presented more details of this plan to you at a work session, and you held a joint meeting with the Economic Development Authority last week, December 5th. So, again, I'm here to answer questions, as is Economic Development Authority Chairman Monty Mason, and we recommend adoption.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think your point that the cooperation and coordination between your office and the planning, between EDA and the Planning Commission on this has been really terrific, and I think we've all benefited from that. So I'll turn to council for any questions.
I don't have any questions.
Comments?
We'll make one comment. Ms. DeWitt talked about the opportunity to craft the economic development strategic plan at the same time that Planning Commission is working on the comp plan, and that all happens at the same time that City Council is working on our biennial goals, initiatives, and outcomes. And all of those, in some way, shape, or form, will tie into the capital improvement plan and the operating budget. And the way all of those things work together is a terrific opportunity for this community to not only put out a good plan, but to create the mechanisms to move that plan forward. And it wouldn't happen without the great staff work that goes behind it. And when you layer on top of that the dashboard system of evaluating, 100, 150, I don't know what we're up to at this point, different ways the city does business, it creates a transparency within the community that allows the citizens to, at a glance, pick those areas of particular focus and determine whether or not the city is doing a great job. And I just think that's a terrific testament to the great work by the staff here.
To take that a step further, something I think needs public mention is, this year's work sessions with both the Planning Commission and the EDA, to me, are representative of a high tide of optimism and forward thinking and progress. And it's important for everyone to understand the amount of work that both of those bodies have put in, especially the EDA in this particular document. I've always been optimistic, but I'm especially optimistic given the past 3 or 4 months.
No, and I just echo that sentiment. I think even for me, well, for all of us, obviously, I think there seems to be, and with all the boards and commissions and council, just kind of a reinvigorated sense of making things happen for the future and putting all of our working documents, kind of synchronizing them so that it's a clear message and a clear set of agendas that will help us get to the future in a productive way. Not that we haven't always, looked at the future and with great hopes and aspirations, but I think we've really coordinated these efforts, today. So I commend the EDA and the staff and the leadership to get us to where we are.
I'd just like to echo all that. I think the staff work is tremendous, but I think we often forget the people who serve on the Planning Commission and the EDA. They work really hard. I am sure they put in more hours than I do, a lot of them, especially during this time when they're doing plans. And they don't get their names in the paper, and they don't get their pictures in the paper, but they're doing a huge amount of work for the city, and they need to be commended for that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo all of those. And again, I think my fellow council members deserve a lot of credit for creating an environment where EDA, the Planning Commission, and City Council can work as a well-oiled machine that's really hitting on all cylinders right now. So it's really nice to see for the community, and I think it means a lot for the future of the city. So with that,
Mr. Mayor, I move the council adopt the economic development plan as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Again, Michelle and Monty, I hope you'll convey our thanks to the whole of the EDA for the hard work that went into this, and again, convey to them, I think all of us felt that the joint meeting we had with EDA as well as the joint meeting we had with the Planning Commission were some of the most productive meetings that we've had, and we thank you for helping create that environment. Our next city manager report is the establishment of a regional business incubator, proposed resolution 12-19.
We'll call on Michelle again.
Michelle again.
Mayor?
You've been busy, Michelle.
We have been. It's very exciting to see all of this starting to happen. So. But Mayor and members of City Council, I'm here today to talk about the regional incubator. And this falls squarely within one of the strategic areas we just talked about in the economic development plan, and that is economic diversification for our community. So I'm going to go through the sort of the mechanics of the plan, and then I'll have EDA Chairman Monty Mason come talk about sort of the bigger picture and how it fits in with the strategies of the EDA. So first of all, what is an incubator? We had a staff meeting where I was teased, is it eggs with chickens coming out of them? So it's not quite that. It's a business incubator. And they've actually been around for more than 50 years in the United States, this concept. And what is it? It is a space where startup and new businesses can rent space. They do pay a rental fee for the space, and they receive access to technical assistance, to financing opportunities, to other things that startup businesses need to be successful. And they also provide a synergy with each other, that they're growing businesses and they can discuss things with each other and problem solve and help each other. So it really, beyond being a startup generating a business creation tool, it's also a marketing tool to any area, back to the we're open for business concept that Councilman Pons mentioned, to attract and keep businesses here. So right now, James City County has an incubator that they operate, and we've been discussing for a couple of years how we could move that as a regional asset for all of us. So the three EDAs have a memorandum that they've agreed to jointly operate the incubator at the James City County location to start. The cost of the incubator are to pay for the building, the rent of the building, but also to have a manager who manages the building. And currently, the College of William & Mary is that manager. They're paid an annual fee to manage the incubator. And in a little bit of research we were doing, 32% of incubators are actually run by colleges. So it's very, it's part of the strategy that you would link with a university where there's a lot of expertise and resources to grow businesses. So that's a real plus for this incubator. And then the income, there's a little bit of income received at the incubator, which is the rent that the occupants, the businesses who are in there, actually pay to be in that space. And then another piece of the income is the revenue sharing piece that we're asking City Council to consider and approve today. So the way the revenue sharing piece works is that as businesses graduate from the incubator, they're encouraged to locate in one of the three historic triangle localities. If they do not, they've signed an agreement where they will actually pay back any subsidies that occurred while they were in the incubator. So that's called a clawback in economic development terms. And so what will happen is if they located in the city of Williamsburg, the city would retain any real estate taxes that are paid by that property. But taxes above that, which for us would be B-POL or personal property taxes, would be shared with the three localities and used to help fund the incubator. So that is the revenue sharing concept, and it would be for a 5-year period. So the resolution in front of you it matches what was already approved in York County and James City County, and it would apply that mechanism that those taxes could be shared to fund the incubator. I think I'll turn it over to Chairman Mason to sort of talk about the bigger picture.
Thanks, Michelle. Mayor Hallman, Vice Mayor Freiling, members of council, Monty Mason, thank you for your consideration of the regional incubator with its concept. I think I'll start with this has really been a great example of the area working together. The economic development professionals deserve a lot of credit. This has actually transcended an economic development professional and a volunteer chairman in James City County and gone to a new set of both. We've discussed this for some time, the opportunity to all work together to grow and expand. The James City County Incubator has done well in the interim since we have had these conversations, and it has only led to more momentum as far as us all working together to try to grow, strengthen, and try to keep these businesses that do grow and develop out of the incubator in our area. And I think that's the next important point is we hear tell of and talk about small business all the time. Michelle will tell you that 80% of job growth in localities are from small businesses. This is the opportunity to help them out of the ground and to help them get going and to locate here in our area without specific requirements other than Williamsburg, James City County, and York. I'll also point to the strategic plan, which we're very appreciative of your input and the time you've spent with us on that, and you just approved. The economic diversity element of that, this really is directly on point to that section of the plan. It focuses on what we talk about a lot, the young professional, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a young professional. It may be a resource that's worked in and around the base or the shipyard or the military all their lives, and they have an idea. They have a concept. They want to stay in the area, but they need some help. It also leverages the intellectual capital that we have at the Great College of William and Mary and the assets that we have there, affording those opportunities and that insight to people in the community. And as importantly as anything, I believe it gives Michelle, Jim Noel in York County, and Russell Seymour in James City County the opportunity to go out and sell that our area is open for business. We want to look at the next opportunity. We want to do what we can to help it thrive and grow. And we think that all joining together, you've seen York County and James City County enthusiastically support this resolution unanimously to this point. And so we think this is a great opportunity for Williamsburg and our area to continue to grow. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Monty.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from council? Comments?
I'll make a comment. It seems like we often read somewhere about the competition between and among our respective jurisdictions for existing businesses and new businesses. And certainly, the City of Williamsburg and James City County, York County, all give their best effort to retain the businesses they have, to attract new businesses, to keep their business community strong because of the significant impact that can have on the financial health of the community. Well, and health of the community in general, and specifically financial health. But what I think it's overlooked is the level of cooperation that exists in the economic development component of our respective jurisdictions. Not only do we have now this proposed joint incubator, the chairs of the economic development authorities of each of the jurisdictions get together on a regular basis and talk about issues along with the economic development directors of each municipality so that they can talk together about what is working for the region and what can we do better and how can we do it together. We have the cooperation on the funding of Arts Month, where the EDAs of the three jurisdictions are coming together along with the Alliance to fund the position of someone who can now orchestrate the activities that have enhanced, just as Mr. Tuttle pointed out, we've seen some results, although maybe not directly attributable to Arts Month. We've seen a sense of enthusiasm in the community for it. We've seen participation by visitors. It's a terrific other example of how we can cooperate to make the community better. We have 2 years ago, we had the business retention conference that was able to locate here because the three localities came together and worked together to bring something to this community that otherwise would have gone to another part of the Commonwealth. So as much as sometimes it seems as though there's competition, there probably is much more cooperation on the economic development, economic vitality front than most people realize. And I just like to let people know that, because we all know about the cooperative efforts between public safety personnel with the mutual aid agreements. We know about the school system with James City County. We know about the library. We know about the jail. But we're all in this on economic development together. And I think this is just one more positive step in that direction.
Scott?
I just have one question. I don't know for whom, but I know William and Mary is going to manage this, or does manage it, and is going to continue. Is there any formal or informal connection with SCORE, with the Alliance?
Great question. SCORE is very aware of the incubator, and whereas we can always do more partnership, they do provide technical assistance to incubator clients as needed. And I'm glad you mentioned SCORE. I think it's another sort of overlooked aspect of this community. They have tremendous resources there and experience that they offer for free to all businesses, startups and existing businesses alike. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Monty and Michelle. And I'm hoping the next step is economic gardening, and we can talk about that. But this is a very critical step, and I think particularly the comments that Paul made about the level of cooperation that's taking place here is really important for the historic triangle as we move into the future.
We need a motion.
We need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt proposed resolution 12-19.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Again, thank you. Our next city manager report is residential permit parking program, proposed ordinance 12-29.
Yes, sir. Last month, you considered a proposal to look at how we do the residential permit parking program, particularly as it relates to guest passes, and the need for some changes in that program. An proposed ordinance was discussed last month, and we have brought that back to you this month with recommending that it be adopted. Let me just summarize quickly what the points are. The first is that there would be, for properties in those areas that have residential permit parking, that properties would go from 3 to 2 guest permits per house or per property. In those cases where a single piece of property has more than one dwelling unit on it, then the max would be 1 guest parking tag per house or per dwelling unit. The ordinance also provides a change that would make it illegal to sell or convey a residential parking permit to a third party, and it provides that the city can revoke permits if they are misused or used in any manner inconsistent with the city ordinance. And finally, that just in terms of the violations of residential permit parking, currently we have a $25 fine, and this would maintain the $25 fine for first offenses, but for the second offense it would go to $50, the third offense to $75. Again, all of this is designed to get better control over that hang tag guest parking pass in residential parking areas. So that's the recommendation before you today.
Thank you very much. Any comments, questions?
I have one question for the city manager. Something that came up during this discussion about which I was not aware, and I'm not sure how aware others are of this either. The hang tag is tied to a specific residential unit. Obviously, they possess it.
Right.
But the ability to use that hang tag to park in the restricted parking district, there's some limitation on how far?
Yes, there's not a particular distance. However, the ordinance provides that it is for the use of guests for that residence. So if we find it's being used even in another part of the city, or that doesn't apply, that does not reasonably be used by a guest of that residence, then it's not being used properly, and we can take action in that case.
Thank you.
So to your point, if you got a Burns Lane tag, it's being used on Indian Springs.
That would be a violation.
Okay.
And the tags actually have the address written
Yes.
on them.
They do.
But the actual sticker on the car is good anywhere in the district?
It's good anywhere within the color-coded
Right.
district. Yes, sir.
Any discussion on somehow incentivizing getting back some expired tags? Talking to the chief, I mentioned it last month.
Sure.
People are getting ticketed for using expired tags, and I think that's probably a bigger problem, than we've discussed. And I still think that, if there was some sort of way to get expired tags back so that they're not just out there running
Well, we
around.
have discussed making the year these tags are only good for a year, for the year in which they're purchased. So, and even though the date is on them, perhaps making it more distinctive so you could see at a glance whether that is an old tag or not.
And the college changes the color as well, so there are various ways
to do that. So we are going to look at that in terms of just administratively and how we do that next year.
Other than that, I think this will go a long way to help to alleviate some of the abuses.
I have one more thing. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Any thought given to this structure and how we can incentivize students to register their vehicles in the city?
The two aren't directly connected. If you have a lawfully registered car in Virginia, and you demonstrate that you live at that address, then you're entitled to a tag on that car. So the answer is there's nothing that says you must register that car in the city and pay your personal property tax in the city in order to do that, if you are lawfully entitled to do that elsewhere. So I think the short answer to your question is there's not a direct link. No.
Right. The only other sticking point for me, and it's partially because I've gotten 2 tickets within a year of one another, is the degree to which, that $25 increase actually makes a difference. $25 to a student hurts. $50 hurts a lot. $75 hurts a whole lot. So, is there any actual change in the deterrent effect? Because $25, I mean, I understand it is. It makes it more serious. But it hurts at 25. Does it need to hurt 75?
Yes.
That's just.
Well, if I could, I think what we're comparing it to is what's the cost of a violation on campus and what's the cost of a parking pass on campus.
Sure.
And even with these escalations, you could still get a couple of tickets before you hit those numbers. On the other hand, we have residents, and you've done it, well, my guests have gotten tickets as well, and I paid that ticket. And it does happen to residents where you simply forget. And so there's a balance here of how far it should go. And we're just trying to find that best balance.
Jack and I have similar experiences. I think I've paid 2 or 3 this year for various reasons, and sometimes the tags go to California or wherever. So I guess one question for you, Chris. As I recollect, the ordinance has something dealing with service vehicles and their ability to park. Do they need tags?
I don't believe they do.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
there's
sorry, I meant to ask
There's
you.
an exception for
There is an
service
exception
vehicles.
for service vehicles.
Yes,
How are service vehicles identified, I guess, is my, and that, I don't need to answer that now, but it's something we might want to look into, because I've heard from various people when this came up that, their, landscape crew was there and they got a ticket, or their cleaning person was there and they got a ticket. Well, how do we identify service vehicles? Or is there a way that we can help homeowners to know if you have someone coming to do work, they need to put something, service vehicle servicing at such and such place? Is that, that's something we may want to look into. I don't think it's part of this, but
Yes.
it's, when I've had several people ask me that question when this came up.
Well, whether it's that or someone can this is not like a moving violation, which once that is written, it's going to be adjudicated through the court system. This can be adjudicated in the finance department.
Okay.
If someone comes in and says, this is what happened, and then if they have not violated the ordinance, just in the case of that, a service vehicle that wasn't clearly marked or something, they can make that decision. And so they're empowered to do that.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Any further questions, comments? I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the approval of proposed ordinance 12-29.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
No.
City attorney reports, I believe we have none.
Nothing under that heading.
Unfinished business, we have one matter, and this is thanks to Mr. Pons' discussion last month, and this deals with business license amendments, proposed ordinance 12-22.
This came before City Council in October, and Council asked the staff to come back and provide some flexibility for the Commissioner of Revenue when issuing a business license, to issue a business license when there are delinquent taxes, which was not in the first incarnation of this ordinance. And so what staff has proposed as an amendment to the ordinance from October is that in the event that there are delinquent taxes, if the taxpayer enters into an agreement with the city to pay those taxes or is currently in compliance with an existing agreement to pay taxes, and because this is a tool that is used by the Finance Department to try to catch people up on delinquent taxes, that the Commissioner of Revenue can issue a business license under those circumstances. And so from staff's perspective, it gives the Commissioner of Revenue some flexibility, and it creates a circumstance where the taxpayer in question needs to deal with the issue, and it helps them deal with it in a focused way that is in negotiation with the city.
Okay, thanks. Any questions, comments?
No, and thank you for going back and reviewing it. I think what we've done, and Ms. Shelton just spoke to it, is, we're providing, we're being, a little heavy-handed, collecting taxes that are due to the city, but we're doing it in a manner that allows that business to continue to operate. They could be on some hard times, and this gives them, the ability to keep their business license so that they can stay in business and work towards paying off that debt. And so I think the amended changes, makes much more sense. So thank you.
Any further? Would you like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we approve proposed ordinance 12-22.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Our next order of business is new business, and this is appointments to boards and commissions. I think, Vice Mayor, you have some.
I do have something for consideration. Mr. Mayor, I move that effective January 1, 2013, City Council appoint Richard Baker and Scott Spence to the Board of Building Code Appeals for 5-year terms to expire December 31, 2017, and to appoint Bobby Braxton to the Community Action Agency for a term to expire June 30, 2013, and to appoint Adam Steely to the Economic Development Authority for a term to expire June 30, 2013.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
An ultimate agenda item is schedule of meetings. Jack, anything in particular?
Nothing to add, no, sir.
We all have that in the thing. Our final order of business today for open session is open forum. This is a time anyone who wishes to address council on any matter may do so. If you wish to address council, please come forward, state your name and address. Not seeing a mad rush for the podium. I think that brings us to a conclusion. We have no matters for closed session. So,
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.